It was a beautiful day, sunny blue sky, going into work, and stopped and got a coffee, and the lady was so nice. And I said, hey, that it's going to be a great day. And she said, yeah, I feel that too.
It's September 11th, 2001. Then Lieutenant Colonel Patty Horoho reports to work at the Pentagon, unaware of the leadership challenge she soon will face.
I got into my office and picked up a piece of paper, and I was going to go down the hallway. And I was walking through, and literally, you know how you see in movies when everything slows down and it becomes very quiet? And you could watch the leaves just twinkle.
The building shakes. The piece ends. The Pentagon has been attacked.
I was located about 150 yards away from where the plane actually hit the building. It hit exactly where the G1 office was. And then the impact of it is it hit the E ring, but it went through D ring, C ring, and caused just so much collateral damage.
More than 20,000 people work at the Pentagon, and Patty is close with many of them. Her training prompts her to action.
I turned to Susie Johnson and said, Susie, I'm okay. You need to know that. And I said, I'm going to go to the impact site. So I went the opposite direction of where people were filing out. And I ran to the impact site.
Patty gets to the crash site. Smoke, fire, fear, and confusion.
At the impact site, one of the things that has stayed on my heart were just the large number of injured people that were being assisted out of the building and the large number of people that were responding.
And on the grass outside, with only what she can carry, she begins treating the wounded. In those moments, she has a realization. This is what war feels like.
And there was heroics of people, carrying people out on their shoulders, people going back in. You just saw really the very best of our country at that moment of time. And I think the other way you honor is you never forget the selfless service, how we were united, how unbroken we were, even in the midst of grief. And every day you should appreciate your life. Every day you should live the best life possible.
In this episode of Army Matters, our co-hosts sit down with Lieutenant General retired Patricia Horoho to reflect on 9/11. 2026 marks 25 years since the attack, and her heroism will be remembered during the National Memorial Day concert held on the Mall in D.C. on Sunday, May 24th. They also discuss her 33 years of service, from nearly leaving the Army after her initial commitment to rising through the ranks to become the first nurse and first woman to serve as the Army's Surgeon General. Now, through initiatives like To Serve Together, General Horoho remains focused on supporting military families, strengthening the broader community, and being a nan to 2 grandchildren. I'm Carrie Varro-Heikes, and this is Army Matters.
So, Dan, I'm taking the lead on this one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Hey, Dan.
Yes, Les.
Welcome back to Army Matters.
Well, thank you.
You know who I am, right?
You are. You're Leslie C. Smith, the 66th Inspector General of the United States Army.
Yeah. And I'm talking with the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Daniel A. Dailey. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Army Matters. We changed things up a little bit because we have a superhero podcast guest today. Superhero. We were at parade rest and attention when we found out that she was going to be on the podcast today.
But sir, there's something else too.
So, what?
She's wicked smart.
She's wicked smart?
Wicked smart.
Is she another? She was another person from up north?
She's wicked smart.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I guess we have to hear about that. That's all good. So should we bring her on to the show today?
I say let's bring her on the show. Yeah.
General Horoho, ma'am, welcome to Army Matters.
Thanks, Les. Great to be here.
Yeah, welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Sergeant Major.
And you know, we spent a lot of time in the Pentagon, you know, walking down those hallways, huh?
Probably too much time.
Yeah, it's all good. So Dan, as you know, the IG's office right across the hallway from the Surgeon General's office, so you couldn't help but run into the Surgeon General all the time. And it was a good time. It was a tough time, but it was a good time from there. So
you must have had free health care if you lived right across the street. Did you have free health care?
Yes, I earned it though. Nothing is free, brother. You know that. So I pay best. And so since we were so close to the Surgeon General, yes, if we had problems, we could go by and say, "Hey, Surgeon General, my elbow hurts." She'll just say, "Get down and do push-ups." You know,
get down and do push-ups.
Yeah, after you talk to her.
And I tried not to drop into your office.
Well, we didn't want you to drop into our office. So, you know, but I will tell you what, the SMA used to drop into my office all the time. He would bring me complaints, Patty.
Yes.
All the time.
All the time.
And all the time. He said I never did anything about it, but he turned out okay.
Yeah.
That's good. So, Dan, I think the first question is yours after we talk about our service histories.
So, ma'am, I'd like to talk about your service. We're going to talk about your extended service. We're going to focus on 9/11 today. But before we get into any of that, what's the first time that you can remember that you felt like you were going to serve in uniform, and why?
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember that all the time. I was a senior at UNC Chapel Hill in nursing and sitting in the back of the room, and it was a nutrition class. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to call a recruiter. I want to join the Army. I only want to do it for 3 years. And so I called a recruiter and we met. He met me on the corner of Franklin Street across from Spanky's, which was a small restaurant, and did an interview. And that was it. I went home and said, "Hey, I'm joining the Army." And every family friend were all shocked because we'd never talked about it at all.
Oh, so do you come from a family of service or no?
I do. We have way
Yeah.
over 200 and something years. My dad fought World War II, Korean, Vietnam with special forces.
Oh, wow.
Is an amazing, amazing soldier. And grew up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then my husband has served, our son is serving, brother-in-laws, just a long lineage of service.
That's cool.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Unless she knows the exact spot and the restaurant. I mean, she knows the exact date
The
and time.
location. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
So where are you from originally, Patty?
Born and raised at Womack Army Medical Center. And
Born and raised.
Born and raised. And what was really neat about that is when I got assigned there as a captain promotable, had both of our kids there. So the same hospital I was born in, John and Maggie were born in.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you plan to only serve 3 years.
I did.
And you just told us about your family serving and your family serves today. Your dad inspired you, your uncles and others. So why did you decide to stay beyond the 3 years?
It came down to, I loved the leadership opportunities. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, there's a story around that. I was a young first lieutenant. Branch called and said, "You've got 24 hours to think about it. We'd like to send you to Letterman Army Medical Center." And I thought, okay, well, I came back. My brother was infantry there. My brother-in-law, field artillery. I was dating a really cute guy. And I thought, called her back the next day. And I said, "Ma'am, thank you so much for that opportunity, but I'd like to stay where I'm at." And she went, "Lieutenant, you have no future in the Army. Do not plan on staying on active duty." And she slammed the phone down.
Wow.
And so I went down to the chief nurse and said, "I think I stepped on it." She said, "What'd you do?" And I told her, and I handed in my resignation papers. And I was literally a 90-day loss when Colonel Journey walked through the ER and said on a Sunday, "Lieutenant, not all doors are closed." And I thought, okay, I'm supposed to get something out of that. And so I applied for conditional voluntary and stayed on.
Yeah. Okay, now you got to back up a little bit. I remember those days. So explain to our listeners, it's not automatic. It wasn't automatic back in the day
Right.
about staying on active duty if you were not regular Army. So I assume you were not regular Army.
I was not regular Army. No.
Neither was I, Dan. So that means we turned that okay.
I was regular Army. For the audience out there, I was regular Army.
Hold on. There's a difference between officers and enlisted. You know the deal, right?
Yeah, one's better.
Okay, I'll leave that alone. I'll let it alone. So explain
and
to our
I'm
listeners
not commenting.
about conditional voluntary. What was going on? What was happening during that time frame?
There was a huge downsizing across the Army at that time, and a lot of our mid-grade officers were getting released, and it wasn't automatic that you would be able to stay on, and so you literally had to apply for a conditional voluntary and deaf, which meant they would keep you on one more year and determine if they were going to keep you longer. And so I applied for that and was accepted. And then after that, they sent me to recruiting command.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to jump into this story, but I'm related to this story because one of my units was involved. So were you on airborne status at all at Fort Bragg?
You know what? I had applied. At that time, very few nurses ever got to go. Yeah. And I kept applying. And then Branch finally said, hey, would you just stop? And so I took that as I'm not going to get to go to airborne
direct.
School.
Yeah. So you spent all that time at Fort Bragg and you were a leg the whole time?
You know what? And my son and my husband give me grief, and my brother-in-law for that. But I just want you to know that it's the leg on the ground that takes care of all those airborne soldiers that hit the ground not the way they want to.
Absolutely right. I've done that many times.
So, ma'am, early in your career, when you were a nurse at Fort Bragg, which is connected to Pope Air Force Base at the time, you were involved in a very critical incident on the green ramp. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'll back it up just real quickly if I could. I was sent to the University of Pittsburgh to get my master's in trauma nursing, clinical trauma nurse specialist, and was working on my thesis. And the first one was critical incident stress debriefing, 60 type pages of the research, couldn't get enough patients. Then went into burns, 60 type pages, all the research behind it. And they fired the burn surgeons, and I wasn't able to do that. And so finally, I was able to do a comparative analysis of 2 different types of burn dressing, and they sent me to Bragg as my utilization tour. And so when you get to any assignment, you look and say, how can you make it better? And I realized they didn't have mass cal carts. We didn't have a mass casualty plan. So one of the things we did is we worked with Pope Air Force Base, Cape Fear Valley, all the EMS around, and developed a scenario that was supposed to occur in April of 1994, where 2 planes were going to collide, multi-trauma victims. But instead, on the 23rd of March, 1994, I'll never forget the day, it was 14:15 in the afternoon, and Sergeant Layton came into the ER and said, Captain Horoho, we've got injuries coming in, 2 planes collided. And I said, oh, this is our mass cal. He said, no, ma'am, this is real. And literally in 15 minutes, we received over the next hour, over 130 injured soldiers. And they were stacked on deuce and a halves, clothes burned off, sidecars from motorcycles, scoop and run method. It was a horrific and actually the worst peacetime disaster that we've had in our history.
Since I spent a lot of time down in Green Rap, so all these soldiers are there getting ready to jump. So the aircraft, C-130, C-141s that are parked on the tarmac, and this is before they moved the fighter jets out of the space. So there were jets there on the ground taking on and taking off. Somehow they ended up colliding, and there were soldiers on Green Ramp, so they were exposed. So all those soldiers that are there prepping, because they got all this gear on, so they can't run as fast as they used to be able to, because they had all the airborne gear with them. And so now Patty's receiving these soldiers. Describe what's happening during when these soldiers start coming in. How do you take into account what you learned, what you wrote your thesis on?
I used the knowledge on both of those research studies at that moment when we had the crash. We had 134 that came in 23 of them passed away. And we had just severe multi-trauma burn injuries. And immediately, because we had prepared, and, we always talk about readiness, right? Train as you fight. And we had done preparation. We had mass cal carts already prepared. We were able to pull those out. Everybody knew their roles. We had worked with Pope. We had worked with Cape Fear. And so instantly, people fell into place. We started the ER actually outside of the ER because we had 23 patients on ventilators. It was a 22-bed emergency room, so overwhelmed the capacity right away. It was 44th Med Brigade that brought over the ventilators for us to be able to use as well. And it was change of shift. So you had everybody coming in. I have never talked about Green Ramp without sharing this one story because it has a lot of things have left an imprint on my heart. But this one, I believe, is the heart of who we are as the American soldier. So we had everybody outside and we opened up pharmacy. People had buckets of morphine because of the pain level. We were doing escharotomies where you cut the skin because it's burned and it's like a tourniquet. We were doing those outside of the hospital. And I was going, bed to bed, talking to people. And there was this one female soldier. And I said, tell me your story as we were getting ready to give her meds and that. And she said, ma'am, I was out there. And she said, some soldier, she said, a large African-American soldier picked me up, threw me in the air, jumped on top of me and whispered in my ear and said, run. And she said, I ran. And when I looked back, he had taken the full brunt of the fireball and saved her life.
Oh my God.
That was Specialist Winfield. And Sergeant Daniel Price was the soldier who gave up his life. And I believe that he represents the very best of who we are as Americans. We are willing to give our life for who's ever on the right and left of us. It doesn't matter what our differences are, our political differences. We're all Americans.
Yeah.
And I think that really is the heart of the selflessness that I saw that day by so many.
So you had put your CV out. Had you planned to leave again after that time frame?
No, just when I was at Fort Carson, Colorado, is when I had actually put in my resignation papers, gave them to Colonel Journey.
Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, when Major Freihofer said, you have no future in the Army, don't plan on staying in, I thought, okay, I guess I don't. And so I did. I put in my resignation papers. And the funny thing is if she would have just said, hey, Lieutenant, we're going to send you here, I would have said, yes, ma'am, and gone. But she said, you've got a choice, which I realized I really didn't, but it was a little late to understand that. So I turned in my papers. And what I found out when I got picked up as a Surgeon General, Colonel Journey called and said, hey, do you want to know the rest of your story? And I said, yes, ma'am, I would love it. And she said, when you turned in your resignation paper, I put it in my drawer and I never turned it in. She said, I knew if I could get you to where you wanted to stay, you were going to be very successful. And she said, so I just want you to know that. And it made me realize how we have mentors and people do so much to shape our careers that we just don't even know.
Yeah.
In the teaser, we heard about your experience in the Pentagon when it was attacked on 9/11. You and a medic did triage on the lawn outside. And how did you bring order to chaos? And how did your time at Fort Bragg teach you to deal with these situations?
I think there's a couple things. So when I got to the impact side, I was able to see a large gaping hole, plane debris all in the front, and billowing smoke. And there was one other person that was out there, and that was Master Sergeant Sepulveda. He was an Air Force Master Sergeant medic. And the two of us just instinctively, because of our medical background, went and started helping people evacuate from the building as much as we could. And there was heroics of people, carrying people out on their shoulders, people going back in. You just saw really the very best of our country at that moment of time. And there were two things from Bragg. So the Pope disaster definitely played into, understanding a lot of how to react and to take care of burns, because that was the big majority of the injuries that came out. the other thing was, while I was at Pope, I deployed to Haiti when it was supposed to be a forced invasion. And then it ended up being, not, but we still went in. I was part of a very small team that was called the Health Facilities Assessment Team. But what I learned from that is a lot of logistics and the need for porta potties, right? The need to all the logistical support that you need. Those two played a key role for instinctively being able to ask for things when, you ask, how did we put order in chaos? Well, part of it was you looked at the landscape, there was a big tree, and we said, okay, our most injured are going to go right to that as a focal point until we could set up, right? Until we can set up other areas. And so we had a place where we had at least 8 that we were able to bring there and get them evacuated before they shut down the airspace. They shut down the airspace several times because they worried about future attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one soldier, a specialist Cahill, who actually was home on vacation. For whatever reason, he said he brought his aid bag with him. And he was watching TV. And when he saw the second plane hit, he saw the fireball at the Pentagon. And he literally ran 2 miles, took his aid bag. And that was the very first medical equipment that we had.
Wow.
And so his actions saved lives.
Wow. So, Patty, I've heard you frequently speak about the brave actions of others on that fateful day at the Pentagon. So can you share some of those stories with our listeners?
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Marilyn Wills, tiny petite female that was in the G1 and OCLL, I think at the time, she literally carried someone larger than she was on her back and got them out. Brigadier General Fuzzy Webster, we're now very good friends, but I didn't know him before that day. He was coming in and out of the building helping to save people. And so much that the stripe down his pants had already been singed because of the heat and everything. And he came up to me and he said, "What do you need?" And I looked at him, I said, "I need your belt." And he gave me his belt and I used that as a tourniquet before we started getting more medical supplies. There was Rob Grunwald, was a lieutenant colonel at that time, was heroic in saving lives. But Sergeant Major of the Army Tilley was out there. He helped us pull together people to get trained to be litter bearers. We created a healthcare system, to be honest, rudimentary, obviously, but by everybody who responded.
Wow. So you talked about moments of remembrance, and you were there, but including visiting the memorial and finding the names of your colleagues. I think we've all done that. How do you carry those memories forward?
You carry memories forward because you keep them imprinted on your heart. And how we honor is by never forgetting, because their story needs to be told. And I have, on September 11th every year, when I was in command, I would pull the units together and actually tell, the story of each one that I knew that passed away, so that people understood the heroics of that day. I believe our actions, by being unified, by being selfless in our service, by honoring all the sacrifices of the flag, by our daily actions with individuals, I think that's how you honor people who have given their lives for this country. And I think the other way you honor is you never forget the selfless service, how we were united, how unbroken we were, even in the midst of grief. And every day you should appreciate your life. Every day you should live the best life possible. And every day I think you need to show humility and grace and kindness to others, because that's what people fought for, is our democracy and to be able to live as Americans.
Memorial Day is about American heroes, our troops, our veterans, and our military families. Tune in to the National Memorial Day concert for a special night of remembrance, 250 years since the founding of our nation, honoring our Gold Star families and their fallen heroes. with co-hosts Joe Mantegna and Gary Sinise, and performances by Noah Wiley, Jamie Johnson, Mickey Guyton, Andy Grammer, and Alan Jackson. Watch the National Memorial Day concert live from the U.S. Capitol, Sunday, May 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, on PBS and the PBS app and YouTube channel.
Welcome back to Army Matters. Now, man, we heard about some of the really challenging days and how you used your medical and logistics skills to help our nation. And then you became a lieutenant colonel. But there's a lot of steps between lieutenant colonel and the Surgeon General of the Army. Can you describe some of your assignments that led to you becoming a general officer?
So a funny story about my career. I had always wanted to be assigned to Europe. And every year I'd get counseled and say, you've got a great career. What's missing? I said, I don't have a European assignment. And everybody would say, as a major, you're not going to make it to lieutenant colonel without one. Then when I became a lieutenant colonel, I got counseled and they said, hey, you're not going to get promoted to colonel if you don't go to Europe. And I said, listen, raising my right hand, I'm ready to go. But I got picked up for the War College. So I went to the War College and I thought coming out, we're going to go to Europe. Coming out of it, they sent me to the Pentagon, and then I was going to go to Command Launch Dole. And then everything broke at Walter Reed. And obviously I didn't get to Europe. So I'm probably the only one who made it to 3-star that has never served in Europe my entire career.
Yeah. So tell our listeners where Landstuhl is. I mean, we know where it is, but tell us where it is, and then tell us what happened at Walter Reed.
Landstuhl Regional Medical Center is just an icon. It's located in Germany. It's one of our flagship trauma centers, and it was where we received so many of our wounded, ill, and injured coming out of the last 20 plus years of war.
Okay. What happened why did you have to go to Walter Reed? What happened?
So Walter Reed, I was picked up for command. And when I got to command at a level 1, which was Fort Belvoir, and then picked up for command at a level 2. Walter Reed was an assignment as the chief nurse of the Regional Medical Center. And so there was Walter Reed and then 7 outlying clinics. And it was only going to be for 1 year because I had already been picked up for command. And I remember I thought, okay, I'm only here for a year. How much impact can you have? And so I looked at kind of the setting for our patients. And to be perfectly honest, the hospital needed a lot of upgrade. They were on the BRAC list, and that's the, base realignment and closure, which means you can't use dollars to improve the infrastructure. You can only maintain when something like water damage, and you fix that, but you can't fix the root cause of it. And so I was there a couple months, and we got this article came out in the Washington Post, and it was about I'd say the heart of it was how we had failed in our promise to care for our wounded, ill, and injured. And there were so many that were injured. There was unlikely survival on the battlefield. And literally within 36 hours of being wounded on the battlefield, they were brought back to the United States, to Walter Reed. And they would undergo like 30 to 40 surgeries. And so they were staying there for 3 years or plus in their families. And so what it really showed is that after Vietnam, we had stopped doing rehabilitative care. We didn't have the support system external to the hospital. And that was really the crux, is the infrastructure wasn't there to support. And an article came out, highlighting all the things that weren't right in the external care environment. And I'll be honest, it shook the foundation of our military health system. It shook the foundation of our Army. And it really reverberated across our nation because people questioned the care that was being provided to our brave warriors.
Yeah.
Now, ma'am, let's talk about your unique journey as a whole to be the Surgeon General of the United States Army. a 3-star position. In doing so, you were also the first nurse and the first female to ever hold that job. Can you tell us about that?
So when I came in the Army, literally just a couple years prior to me coming in, they changed the rule that if you were pregnant, you could stay on active duty. Shows how old I am. At that time, nurses could not command, and it was only physicians that were able to command hospitals. And so it wasn't until I think it was like the 1990 where it opened up for all branches to be able to command. So it was atypical, to be perfectly honest, for a nurse to be able to do that. And I felt very privileged that I was selected. And I think command, as we know, is to serve, nothing more, nothing less, right? It's one of the most humblingest opportunities, but it also, allows you to draw upon all the leadership the Army invests in you. And I think it's a way that we give back to what the Army has given us when we're in command positions. And so to get picked up for command, it was not easy for anybody. That was not, that was in the AMED. And then to get picked up to go to, the War College, for nurses, it was less than a 1% selection rate. So to be honest, we didn't have a lot of those opportunities. It's opened up more and more as the years have gone on. Each of those jobs allowed me to grow and I think be prepared for the next. And so Walter Reed, first nurse since in 98 years that they ever had a non-physician command Walter Reed. We had 42 investigations, 4 unannounced joint commissions, and I can't even tell you how many members of Congress came, and the president. And that the reason why I share that is it taught how to lead in complex, uncertain environments, and we were able to change the way we cared for our wounded warriors, and we changed the Army at that time. So a lot was done within a year.
Really, you changed the nation. So tell us, to get all our nurses fired up, what do nurses bring to the table that makes them such great leaders, such great commanders?
That's an easy. I think what nurses bring to the table is, one, it starts in the way that we're educated. We are educated from the perspective of systems approach, of team of teams, and it's never about one individual. It's literally about the collective, capabilities of the team in order to care and show compassion to those that we have the privilege to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a lot of my jobs, whether it was recruiting command, whether it was, deployment to Haiti, all of those actually, I used my nursing skills in a lot of the non-nursing jobs. I think the other thing is nurses are very good about not caring who gets credit, but just making sure that the mission gets done. And I think that's vital.
Yeah. So I want to pull a thread on that because you are, and I know you personally, I know our listeners don't, but I know you, and I had the honor and privilege to serve with you and for you. And you're very humble. But for our listeners out there, she was the first nurse and first woman to ever be the Surgeon General of the United States Army. And I remind, is in charge of every aspect of healthcare for the Army. Now, I know you're not going to acknowledge that because you're so humble, but what does that mean? What message do you send to young nurses that might want to join service someday about the barriers that they could break themselves?
Yeah, I thank you. It was a privilege to serve with both of you. I think what I would say is take risks. And when a mentor looks at you and believes that you have the capabilities to do something and you don't believe it in yourself, you need to lean forward and do it. And every job I went into, I'll be honest, I thought, oof, this is where they've promoted me above my capabilities. And, and then 60 days later, you understand, you figure it out. But those first 60 days are like drinking through a fire hose in any new job. I think it's important to, one, never wait to be asked to join the table or have your voice heard. And I'll tell you kind of where I learned that. I was a young second lieutenant. I was at Fort Carson, and I went into the supply room. It shows our age. but went in supply room, and there was a young sergeant sitting there, and I said, I need to go back to get some supplies. And he said, you can't. I said, what do you mean I can't? He said, you can't go back there. And I thought, okay, this is just wrong. And so I walked away and I thought, okay. Next day I turned and I went down to the same place, same person working. I said, good morning, Sergeant. I said, I'm going back to get my supplies. He said, good morning, Lieutenant. Have a good day. And what it taught me, okay, what it taught me was he was teaching me, don't ask permission when you have the authority to do something. And I have to tell you, that stuck with me. And the other thing is I realized is it's not that people don't want you at a meeting or being part of something. They may not think about inviting you. And so if you feel like you need to be there, just insert yourself. And 9 times out of 10, people won't ask you to leave. And I've found that those two things are really important. And the other is fail outwards. It is okay. Because when you take risks, you're going to fail. And just learn from it and don't repeat it.
So tell us about your first week or so being the Surgeon General for the Army, the TSG. How did you feel? You got promoted. Then what after that?
I got a call from General Casey and he said, hey, Patty, what are you doing? And I said, well, sir, I'm at a medical conference. Just got here. And he said, congratulations. He said, you've just been nominated to be the next Surgeon General. He said, get on a plane and come home.
Wow.
And so I probably was the most shocked because I didn't get called in for an interview. I didn't think I was selected. And so I came back. And when I did, the reality of and the enormity of what I was going to have the privilege to lead, I went to General Schoonmaker and also to the Vice and asked if I could deploy to Afghanistan. Because I thought if I am going to lead the total Army force in health, I need to fully understand what our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines have been dealing with on the battlefield. And they allowed me to deploy. I went for 4 months under General Scaparrotti and oversaw healthcare across Afghanistan, traveled 4,000 miles, and I saw the very best of what we as American soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines do on the battlefield. But I also saw the pressure and the impact of so many years of war. It changed, to be perfectly honest, it changed my entire strategy of how I led. I said I would like to meet with our Black Ops. And I will never share what we talk about, but I need to understand the impact that this has had on that community as well. And so literally at 1 a.m. in the morning, clandestine, met with them, and we talked for about 4 hours. It changed our behavioral health strategy. It changed how we took care of families. And it also, that and other places across Afghanistan led to what is now our health to fitness program, where we looked at sleep, activity, nutrition. So that was the precursor that was so important. In the first week, it was very daunting, to be perfectly honest. And I thought the hardest thing was going to be being the first nurse. It was being the first female. Communicate it differently. People were not used to a woman leader. I'm very transparent, and people thought I had so many agendas because of that transparency. And so I really had to look at how my communication style. And I had good friends from Israel and in France who were Surgeon Generals. And a year into the job, they called and they said, hey, you want to know what happened when your name was announced? And I said, I'd love it. And they said, it was like the shot that was heard around the world. All of the states called each other and said, all of the countries, excuse me, not states, called each other and said, do you realize the United States picked a female to be the Surgeon General? It wasn't that it was a nurse. It was that it was the first female. And so it made me realize that we are mentors in whatever positions we're in. I didn't want to be the last. It was okay being the first, but to be perfectly honest, I wanted to make sure I wasn't the last, and that I could open up doors for others to follow.
Yeah, you definitely have, because Mary's in there now and she's doing a great job.
I love it. Yeah.
Ma'am, I know our listeners would love to hear you talk all day long and your humility, gosh darn it, you're so darn humble. That's my favorite leadership attribute. You describe it perfectly. But let's transition a little bit. As we approach Memorial Day and the 25th anniversary, I can't believe it's 25 years since 9/11. Why is it important for Americans to reflect on these kind of stories?
I think it is so critical that we not forget the heroics that occurred on that day, that we don't forget the individual and the collective stories that really are woven into the fabric of our country and are woven into the fabric of our flag and what it stands for. We were very united. It was tremendous grief. It was, to be honest, anger that our country was attacked and so many innocent lives. But what it showed me is our country is very selfless. Under pressure, we come together. Our country is resilient in ways that our enemy will never, ever understand. We've seen that on the battlefield at the Pentagon, and we've seen it everywhere we've ever served. It's not just the military, it's our community. And I always look at the flag and realize the reason why we're called the United States of America is because we unite regardless of our political differences, our religious differences, our gender, our ethnicity. We unite around the common values of what it means to be an American. And I think that makes us very special. And I think all those stories, one, you honor the people who have given their lives for us. You honor their family because they have sacrificed a loved one. And I think you've got to remember so that you hopefully don't ever have to repeat something again, and that you respect the privileges that we have every day and we don't take it for granted. There's not a year that goes by on September 11th that I don't look back and say, God, thank you for allowing me to see my kids grow up. Thank you for allowing me to see my grandchildren.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything I've experienced. It's a gift.
Wow, that's amazing. Hey, talk to us briefly about To Serve Together. What's the mission there?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I started early with my dad being, 3 CIBs, right? World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And he had Parkinson's from Agent Orange exposure, macular degeneration. So the last 13 years of his life, he was in a wheelchair, but he'd always wear his baseball cap with the 3 wars on it, and he'd kind of be slouched over. And people would say, thank you for your service. And I watched him. He'd straighten up in his wheelchair, and I could see that Special Forces soldier. It stayed on my heart for almost 20 years, to be perfectly honest. In COVID, I said, this is the year I'm going to do it. Got with Ann Han, and we designed the Women of Valor brooch. And it's a forget-me-not, and it's purple to represent all the services. In the center is a pearl for purity of mission and femininity. And then around that is a small gold star for those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. And then the leaves are in the shape of a V for victory, valor, and veteran. And so my intent with this is, one, to recognize those that have served this great nation, to be able to have our nation be able to, a visible symbol to recognize them and say thank you, to do a connection and to really get that community of women veterans connected so we can help them navigate and we can help them heal and we can honor their service. And so we've been doing Women of Valor retreats in partnership with Travis Mills Foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation, and we're working to grow that across the country.
So if people, it looks like you have the brooch on today.
I do.
Okay, for our listeners, she's wearing what she just described. So how can people get in contact with you?
The number 2, and it was the number 2, and then servetogether.org. And the 2 was symbolic of we never serve alone. To servetogether.org. If people buy the different items that have the symbol, all of that money goes back into supporting women to go to the Women of Valor retreats. We're working on building an app that allows for navigation, but also to connect with other nonprofits because no one can do it alone. And really what we want is a central site to help them to navigate to all the other great nonprofits that are out there. We had so many people, like we've recognized ESPN employees, we've recognized Disney employees, employees across the board. And so many people came up and said, well, I'm not a veteran, but I support them. And so we developed the Women of Valor symbol and we put an S behind it that just shows support for women veterans. And all of those funds go into supporting our veterans.
That's cool.
National Memorial Day Concert. What does that
Yes.
mean to you, and what's your involvement?
You know, what Capitol Concert has been doing and it continues to do is they bring to life stories of everyday Americans that have done heroics, have, withstood horrible sacrifices, the ultimate sacrifice of losing a loved one, and have moved forward and moved from being broken to unbroken and resilient and giving back. And they honor all of those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice from all of our past wars. They bring to life the stories that I think bring the strength of our country, and they do it in such a moving way. They capture our history, which I think is a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this, your family. So we should talk about that. So tell us about your son and daughter, your husband. I mean, there's a lot of things you had, all those balls up in the air.
Oh, yeah.
We saw each
Mr.
other.
Horoho is one of my favorite guys. He's one of my favorite guys. I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's my best friend. We've married 35 years. We met when we were both young captains. Ray started out as a signal officer, a multifunctional logistician, served 27 years. He transitioned into the reserve and finished the majority of his career in the reserves, and then came in as a DA civilian, was the acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Ray is one of the most humblest, selfless people I know, and one of the most giving. And he has a beautiful story on 9/11, where he actually had the disc of how do you do a partial mobilization. He had it with him at home. They had done the exercise because he was working in ASD Reserve Affairs. And when 9/11 hit, he got called in and he just grabbed that, the green flight bag, and it was in there. Because he had that, everything else in the computers were gone. Because he had that, that is how the president was able to so quickly mobilize all of those reserve forces. So I could not be more proud of him. And he got pulled on active duty on 9/11 and, served. So both of us were dual military for quite a lot. And our kids have been so resilient, like so many military kids, right? Our daughter she was a senior probation officer for about 7 years. She's a young mother of a soon-to-be 1-year-old little boy. And then our son, he graduated, went into active duty, served at the 82nd Infantry, deployed to Afghanistan when they did, the withdrawal, and then went into the reserves. He has a little girl that just turned 1 on 3 April. So we're blessed with 2 little grandbabies, and being a Nana is probably my best mission in the world.
Well, Patty, there's so many things, again, like we could keep talking about, but we really appreciate your service to the nation.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you've done and setting the foundation for all of us who followed you.
Les, thank you very much. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve with you both.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks. Take care.
Hey, did you get your AUSA merch yet? Check out our online selection at shop.ausa.org.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Army Matters is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission, educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and supporters of a strong national defense. Today's episode was hosted by Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith and SMA Retired Dan Dailey, and anchor hosted by Carrie Barrow-Heckes. Andy Bosnack is the associate producer and supervising sound editor. Major Ryan Crane is the writer, and Ellen Toner is the content editor. Umzinga Curry is the executive producer. Carrie Barrow-Heckes is the senior producer, and Savannah Campbell-Smith is the producer. Be sure to subscribe to Army Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. As you know, we love seeing stars in the Army, especially if it comes in the form of a 5-star review. AUSA's Army Matters podcast can also be heard on Reach Across America Radio on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app with the search of the word Wreath. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. AUSA's Army Matters podcast primary purpose is to entertain. The podcast does not constitute advice or services. While guests are invited to listen, listeners, please note that you're not being provided professional advice from the podcast or the guest. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AUSA. I'm LaSharon Duncan, hoping you have a great Army Day. Hooah!